Good evening. You're watching Straight Talk with Eugene Chan. Our guest tonight is Professor Lau Xiaogai, who is Emeritus Professor of Sociology at the Chinese University of Hong Kong and Vice President of the Chinese Association of Hong Kong and Macau Studies. Professor Lau has served our Hong Kong SR government in various capacities over the last 30 years, including being head of the Central Policy Unit. He has also been a member of the CPPCC since 2003. Professor Lau is an active commentator on social and political development in Hong Kong, with many publications in this area. We have invited Professor Lau to tell us if cross-strait hostility is on the rise. Welcome, Professor.
Hey, hello, Gigi.
Professor, in the last 3 weeks, many things have happened. We had Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, ending up despite numerous warnings from the Beijing's foreign ministry. Our motherland has launched the largest ever military exercise surrounding Taiwan and also issued a white paper. On the other side, the US has unveiled the Taiwan Policy Act, have also started negotiations with Taiwan on bilateral trade agreement. We'd like to ask you, basing on that, a few areas for your expertise. And one is about the military exercises. It has been shown that the People Liberation Army has the full power to do so-called a full blockade of Taiwan. So is this the only signal that PLA is sending through?
Well, I think that China is very determined this time to resolve the Taiwan issue once and for all. The military exercises only mean that China is launching a whole series of actions to force Taiwan into political negotiation with the mainland over the details of one country, two systems, which is the formula employed by the mainland to reunify the country. So we are going to see more and more actions, military, trade, diplomatic, etc., to be applied on Taiwan by the mainland to make sure that the Taiwan will be subject to increasing pressure, and also to show that under these pressures, Taiwan cannot be able to get too much help from the United States to thwart the mainland's initiatives to change completely the Taiwan situation.
Well, Professor Lau, one of the terms that often been mentioned in the news is the median line. What is the median line, and what is the significance of it being crossed right now?
Well, the median line is basically an informal line in the Taiwan Strait, originally set by the Americans in 1996. And for a long time, both sides of Taiwan Strait were willing to observe this line. But by crossing this line this time, what Beijing is trying to show, not particularly to show the Taiwanese people and the United States, that Taiwan is now under the overall jurisdiction of China. That means China will see Taiwan as part of its own, so that China no longer have to observe the so-called medium line, as well as the so-called air defense identification zone set by the Taiwanese. So what we are seeing now is that China is treating Taiwan is basically an internal affair within China, and China is also going to take all action available to make sure that this Taiwan issue can be resolved within a reasonable period of time. The best scenario is peaceful reunification, but China will never give up and might eventually resort to unpeaceful reunification to make sure that China will be a reunified great power.
Right. Professor Lau, some say that US is trying to push China into initiating a conflict, based on the fact that with the Pelosi visit, there was much talked about them. I mean, it's better for her not to go, but obviously Biden didn't stop it because, according to the Washington Post, Pelosi said if President Biden asks her not to go, she won't go, or Tsai Ing-wen withdraw the invitation. So obviously, Biden is fully aware of the consequence of its inaction. And moreover, since last week, last week we had a delegation of 5 representatives from the U.S. Congress to go to Taiwan. And right at this moment, actually yesterday, we had the first time the Indiana governor actually visiting Taiwan with a delegation. Suddenly, there's a very high-profile visit to Taiwan. So do you think this is a planned plot, or this is just happened by coincidence, as they said it was planned some time ago?
Well, not necessarily. Under the current political atmosphere in the United States, particularly in view of the by-elections in the coming months, and all the politicians in the United States want to show the people in the country that they are hawkish in the policy toward China. And given the fact that the executive branch of the government cannot control the behavior of the legislators and other people in the states, so they are competing for to show that yes, they are willing to take a hard line against Beijing. But even Beijing would be very careful to choose the kind of reaction it is going to take. Pelosi is the third most important politician under the American system. That's why China has to demonstrate its hostility or its anger toward the American provocation. But for the other congressmen or other governors, etc., Beijing would simply launch some protest, maybe also some military exercises to show Beijing displeasure. But in any case, at the present moment, I think Beijing is already made up its mind that in the eyes of the United States, a divided China, a permanently divided China, is to the best interest of the United States. That's why China is in a hurry to resolve the Taiwan issue, because Taiwan is no longer only an issue of unification, but also an issue of national security, because Beijing is seeing Taiwan being used increasingly by the United States as part of the so-called right, Indo-Pacific strategy to contain and weaken China. Right. And if this trend is not stopped, Taiwan not only will not be reunified with the country, but will become a threat to national security. That's why China is so determined this time to resolve this Taiwan issue once and for all.
Right. Professor, while you mentioned the term national security, where many Hong Kong viewers will feel that they're imminent threat. But if you look at the Third Strait crisis in 1996 and 1997, where US Navy do send the warships into the area, compared to this time, actually the warship actually left with Pelosi. So there's something there to note. And also we talked about the Taiwan Policy Act, which hasn't been enacted, it's been delayed. It actually says they recognize Taiwan as a major non-NATO ally and provide almost $4.5 billion over the 4 years to bolster the defense capacities. So what do you say to that if it does pass?
Well, I think China is now have seized the initiative on the Taiwan issue. And China is looking very closely on what the United States is going to do in the days ahead. And this time is different from the 1995, 1996, 1997, because compared to 1996, China is much more powerful today. And by showing these exercises, I think a lot of American strategists have been impressed by the military exercises around Taiwan. China wants to show the United States, if the United States continues to obstruct China's reunification, it has to pay a very heavy price.
Right.
And China has shown that it has the capability to take on the United States right, by denying its entry into the theater of Taiwan.
Right. Professor Lau, we had Mr. David Lee here 2 weeks ago, and he said that the issue between Taiwan and motherland is actually an internal affair, which you have also mentioned. So obviously the reason why US is interfering for her own interests. But isn't that the change from the one China policy she professes that they will still respect that? Is that against that?
From our own point of view, the one China policy of the United States is no longer there, particularly when the United States seem to downgrade the importance of the free communication between the United States and China and put priority on the domestic laws of the United States, such as the Taiwan Relations Act, as well as the so-called six assurances to Taiwan. Well, what the United States is doing now is to increasingly recognize Taiwan as an independent political entity and try to develop closer diplomatic and military relationship between the United States and Taiwan, selling a lot of arms and ammunition to the Taiwanese. So, from China's point of view, China has given up hope already that the United States will look with equanimity relation between Taiwan and the mainland.
Professor Lau, before we go to the break, I want to ask you about the white paper that was published on the August 10th. It said the title Taiwan Issue and China's Reunification in the New Era, saying that they're basing on one country, two system, they're basing on peaceful reunification. But at this moment, it looks like we are not going along that direction. So, question of the show today, is cross-strait hostility risen to a point that we have to be concerned?
Well, I think what the result will be depends very much on the reaction of the United States. Now, because China has already demonstrated its position, and that is it will resort for force if necessary to reunify the country. So China will watch very closely what are the reaction of the United States in the days ahead. Particularly, as I can see, what will the Taiwan Policy Act fare? How will that policy act fare in the days ahead? Because, as you said, this Taiwan Policy Act will be even more provocative than all the action which the United States has taken in the past, because it treats Taiwan as basically a military ally against China. Particularly when China is now concerned about whether the U.S. is going to construct a so-called Asian NATO,
right?
To contain China's rise.
Shall we take a break now? And don't go away. We'll be right back. We have been talking with Professor Lau about the recent developments in the cross-strait crisis. So, Professor, before the break, we had mentioned about whether hostility is on the rise, and there's also a white paper issued by Motherland. One question is that the Taiwan Foreign Ministry spokeswoman have said that they have rejected the one country, two system, that we propose to so that we have a peaceful reunification. So, with the Democratic Progressive Party Taiwan still in power, or any of her successor, is it going to make this reunification in a peaceful way basically an impossible way forward?
Well, basically, I'm not surprised by the fact that the Taiwanese will reject the one country, two system principle. But we also know that this one country, two system principle means this one country means the People's Republic of China. And that has been very quite explicit by the mainland. So I'm not surprised that the Taiwan will reject the one country, two systems. But the problem is that if the pressure on Taiwan increases in the days ahead, if even some kind of blockade on Taiwan by the PLA is going to take place, the pressure in Taiwan might increase to such an extent that there may be an outflow of capital and talent from Taiwan, as well as internal divisions among the Taiwanese. Then Beijing will look further ahead to see whether those forces in Taiwan which are favorable to reunification will rise and create an atmosphere or environment for the two sides of the street to talk about the country's reunification. So we have to look at what is going to happen in Taiwan in the years ahead. At the same time, the Taiwanese and China will also look very closely on whether the United States are determined to defend Taiwan militarily if the so-called invasion from mainland takes place. But from my own point of view, I don't think the United States will risk a war with China, which might go nuclear, in order to prevent Taiwan from returning to the motherland. So a lot of things can happen. But in the meantime, I think the tension, the cross-strait tension, and the tension between China and the United States will increase tremendously in the days ahead.
Right, Professor Lau, since we talk so much about from the global perspective, say from the Hong Kong side, a lot of Hong Kong people would have said, I'm sure the viewers will agree with me, saying that the one country, two systems that we practice will be a model for Taiwan people to look at how it can work. But now, after the last 3 years, we had the national security legislation, as well as Patriots administrating Hong Kong principle. Is this going to help the Taiwanese people have more confidence in the one country, two system, the Taiwan version to come? What do you think?
Well, not necessarily in the meantime, because Taiwanese people, as well as a lot of Hong Kong people, have an inaccurate idea of what one country, two system is all about. They see Hong Kong as an independent political entity, denying Beijing the powers under one country, two system. Now, in Beijing, from Beijing's point of view, one country, two system has not been practiced comprehensively, accurately for many years. So, what happened in the last several years is that the Hong Kong's one country, two system begins to operate according to the original design of Beijing, particularly the design of Mr. Deng Xiaoping. So, if in the years ahead, we have to do two things. One is to demonstrate to the Taiwanese people that they have mistaken one country, two systems for what in the past, and now they have to observe what will be the result if one country, two system is operating comprehensively, accurately. Secondly, I think from Hong Kong's point of view, if we can, in the new circumstances, develop Hong Kong properly, ensuring prosperity and stability, and show the Taiwanese people that when one country, two system is practiced correctly, then a lot of benefit can come to Hong Kong. And by inference, if Taiwan adopts one country, two system formula, Taiwan can also enjoy prosperity and stability, as well as a high degree of autonomy. So I would say that in the days ahead, we have to correct the misunderstanding of Taiwanese people as to what one country, two system is all about in Hong Kong, and to show that Hong Kong can still prosper and develop and maintain stability under one country, two systems when it is correctly practiced.
Right. Professor Lau, one thing that I'm sure the viewers have noticed and sent me a message to ask you is that, unlike before, the Hong Kong government officials actually were quite quiet in response to all these national matters involved in the international arena. But this time, we see the chief executive, the chief secretary for administration, everybody along the line have all issued separate statements condemning the Pelosi visit. Is this a new role that Hong Kong is going to play? Are we going to be one of the front guards for the mainland?
Well, I think that for those essential issues facing the country, particularly those political issues, Hong Kong and the Hong Kong officials have the duty to stay in line with Beijing and to show that we have some kind of solidarity when some important issues facing the nation are at stake. But on the other hand, I would say that in the days ahead, Hong Kong will meet with a lot of hostility and antagonism from the West. And don't expect the relationship between Hong Kong and the West to improve tremendously. Right. But at the same time, I think Hong Kong can still work together with the country to develop or to forge better relationship with developing countries to help China overall diplomacy.
Right. Professor, you just mentioned basically the Taiwan Strait region is going to be a very high-risk area, and Hong Kong seems to be in the front line. So do we have a real risk of national security if anything happens to Taiwan? Do you think Hong Kong will be affected directly rather than just indirect effect by the blockade, for example?
If tension continue to rise between the mainland and Taiwan, Hong Kong must be affected. And you can see in the last several years, Taiwan has been heavily involved in Hong Kong's riots or insurrection. A lot of Taiwan independentists have operated in Hong Kong to promote Hong Kong instability. So, in the days ahead, even though Hong Kong does not have official, we do not have autonomy in terms of official relationship with Taiwan, we have to follow the lead of Beijing. But in any case, I expect the relationship between Taiwan and Hong Kong to deteriorate further.
Right.
Because officially, we have to follow the line of Beijing to sanction the Taiwanese, particularly its officials, and the people advocating independence. But hopefully, we can still maintain our economic and social exchanges with Taiwan. Now, even so, if Beijing's pressure on Taiwan continues to increase, and if Beijing insists or demands that Hong Kong follow suit in some areas, in terms of social and cultural and economic exchanges, then our relationship with Taiwan might deteriorate further. Right. But in any case, the relationship between Taiwan and Hong Kong, in official sense, is already very bad.
Right. Professor?
The official linkages are basically untenable these days.
Right. Professor, the last minute question I want to ask you, the last 1 minute, is that the word semiconductor has been in the spotlight in the news. And with Nancy visiting to the Taiwan's trade, and they have the Chip and Science Act passed in U.S., they provide subsidies of $52 billion to support the semiconductor development in U.S., provided that they don't do business with China. So this is going to put a lot of pressure onto the businesses. So how shall China respond to that?
Well, the only thing China can respond is to develop its own indigenous semiconductor industry. Because eventually, I will expect the United States to reduce its dependence on Taiwan for semiconductors. Okay. That's why Taiwan conductors are forced to relocate to the United States. But that is not good news for Taiwan. Because if the semiconductor industry is away from Taiwan, that means Taiwan's value to the United States will become lower and lower.
Right. So thank you, Professor Lau, for enlightening us on the latest developments of the cross-strait crisis. I'm sure all our viewers and the rest of the world will be watching these events very closely. Have a good week, stay healthy, and good night.